Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this workshop today. So, we'd like just to start by thanking the Columbus Foundation for sponsoring this parent workshop and for giving us the opportunity to share a free four-part parenting workshop series for parents. So, we are starting today with the helpful tips for parenting a child with ADHD. And we are recording this workshop tonight, so it's available for your future reference, and so that it's available for others who weren't able to make it tonight. As we do know that it is a summer night, there is a very busy time, so this will be available for anyone who needs it in the future. So we will take a moment to introduce ourselves as well. So my name is Elaine Parsons. I'm one of the co-presenters of this workshop today and one of the clinicians here at Mid-Ohio Psychological Services. And I will give Claire just a moment to introduce herself, and then we'll talk a little bit about what this training will all include.
Thanks, Lainey. We are really glad to be here with you presenting this information. And again, I just want to reiterate Lainey's appreciation for the Columbus Foundation. It wouldn't be possible for us to be able to share this information without them. So we are grateful for that. My name is Dr. Claire Robitaille. I am a clinical psychologist and have worked here at MOPS as part of both the clinical team and the leadership team. And I'm happy to be here presenting this with Lainey today.
Alrighty, so this is a brief overview of some of the information we're going to be talking about today. So Claire is going to be starting us off just with a piece of what is ADHD, talking a little bit about the history behind it, talking a little bit about the diagnostic pieces, how the ADHD brain really works, and therefore how that neurological piece is going to show up with that child's emotions, their behavior, their relationships, all of those pieces. From there, we're going to be talking about some different parenting strategies, because I know that is our overall goal for today, is to talk about some different parenting tips. So we'll be talking about different parenting styles, different behavioral strategies, giving an overview of medication and other health style pieces that you can do, some different schedules, routines, all the different kind of ways you can best kind of help keep that child close to, or keep them away from some of the detours that we know their brains can go down. And then we're also going to be finishing with some parent self-care and really talking about what's next, and you taking care of yourself as a parent, and for also us being able to provide some other information and resources to help with those goals. So Claire, you can share any other pieces from here or start taking away with what is ADHD.
Perfect. Let's go with the next slide.
I'm ready.
So as Lainey said, we're going to start with just a brief overview of explaining ADHD in a nutshell. You could do a whole course just on that, but for our purposes today, because we want to focus more on our strategies, tips, and tricks for parenting and for parents, we do first want to understand what it is. Like, why do we need to even have specific strategies? So the first thing I think is really important for people to understand is often there's this myth that ADHD is made up or that it is a relatively new disorder, when in fact, the symptoms of ADHD are well documented back in 1846. So they've been around a very, very long time. The first recorded documented work was actually done by Dr. Heinrich Hoffmann, who wrote a poem about his own child, who translate the names Zappel Philip to Fidgety Philip. And so in his own frustration, he obviously used writing as a coping tool. In his own frustration, he wrote a poem, and you can go online and Google that, and the poem is relatively long. But in 2004, the British Medical Journal pulled that poem and analyzed it and identified it as the very first documented, recorded piece of literature that clearly describes typical ADHD behavior. Now, through the years, we've got lots of different names for ADHD. Currently, we are using attention deficit disorder to describe the disorder, but in the past, it's been described in lots and lots of different ways. So that's the history of it. Our next slide is going to talk a little bit about what exactly it is. So ADHD is actually a neurological condition or disorder with behavioral implications. Okay, I think that's a really important definition you want to try and conceptualize. So if you look at the brain on the slide in the left, you're going to see what looks like a circuit and a very, oops,
Can you see that now?
yeah,
Okay,
sorry.
perfect.
The brain that's got a circuit board underneath it is very organized. So information goes in and gets very well organized and comes out in a very well organized behavioral way. And if you look at the little two people on the slide, you'll see one brain is a very organized swirl, and the other brain is kind of a jumbled mess. And I will let you guess which one is the ADHD brain. And Lainey earlier used the word detour because that's exactly what happens. Information goes into the brain, and instead of following the normal paths, the paths are somewhat detoured and information gets jumbled. Information does not get processed the same way in an ADHD brain as it does in an average brain. So our next slide, we're going to look at the implications of that. So when the brain processes information differently, we have outcomes that look different. So the ADHD brain handles things differently than the average brain in what we call executive functioning. Executive functioning are the things that allow us to set goals, make plans, implement those plans, actually get busy on them, stick to them even when we get tired and frustrated, we keep right on going, and then reaching our goal and feeling good about ourselves. And we do that because we have memory and recall. We have timing and sequence. We can plan using the sense of this is going to take me 20 minutes as opposed to this is going to take me 2 hours. We can estimate how long something's going to take, and we know when to start and when to finish to make that happen. For an ADHD brain, that doesn't work as well. It's very, very difficult for that timing and sequence of behavior. Keep in mind the detour. So information comes in, and immediately some other information might replace it or interfere with that timing and sequence. Executive functions also control how motivated we are, how we can concentrate, how we push ourselves to stay focused. That is very difficult for somebody's brain who is in detour, ADHD. And it allows us also, executive functions do allow us to be self-aware, to reflect for a moment, to slow our knowledge, our information brain down, and to reflect, what am I feeling and how do I want to respond? Which allows me to manage my impulses, my thoughts, and my emotions. And we call that self-regulation. It allows me to understand, okay, I'm a little nervous right now. Let me take a deep breath. And I'm doing this presentation. It's a little bit nerve-wracking. Let me appreciate how I feel, take a deep breath, and then proceed. That is regulating my body, my mind, and my emotions. That is enormously difficult for individuals whose brain goes into detour mode or is on detour mode. And you can begin to imagine how that feels for somebody who compare somebody's brain who's very organized and can achieve all these things and that feeling of success compared to somebody who finds it very difficult to do these things and experiences the frustration. So if Lainey does it really well and I do it really poorly because I'm on detour mode, then I may feel bad about my own abilities and start questioning my abilities. Whereas Lainey's going to get a sense of achievement. So in the next slide, we're going to look at the implications for what ADHD actually turns out looking like and why we call it a disorder. ADHD affects our ability to attend to tasks and to focus and concentrate. So people with ADHD have difficulty following instructions. They may look like they're not listening. They have very difficult time staying focused and attending without really high motivation. So if somebody says, Claire, I'll give you $1,000 to finish this training, I will finish the training. But if somebody says, Claire, you're doing a great job, just go ahead and finish the training, I may get distracted. I may find it hard to stay focused. Daydreaming. Again, that think of the brain as on detour. I know I'm supposed to be doing my math page, but my hamster's over there in the corner, and I am really amazed at how fast it's going tonight. Okay, so the brain takes a detour and then finds so many other ways to get detoured in addition to that. So next thing you know, math homework's not done. Forgetfulness. Again, when you've got too much information in your head, colliding, it's very hard to organize it in a way that you can remember. And it looks like they make careless mistakes, going too fast or too slow, and they can be very disorganized. None of that's a surprise when you look back at the slide with the brain and the swirly lines, and you think of it as a disorganized situation, making it very hard to be planful and organize yourself. The other part that ADHD brains give us pause and problems with is managing and regulating. And as I said before, both our emotions and our behavior. So people with ADHD have more difficulty sitting still. They tend to want to move all parts of their body. They fidget. They frequently have what some teachers would call motor mouth. They don't stop talking. They talk too much. They may have trouble waiting their turn. They may be viewed as impatient. They act first and think second. You notice in my example, when I said, okay, I'm feeling anxious, I thought first and then took a deep breath. For people with ADHD brains, it's very easy to act first and then think, oh, probably should have done that differently. And they can find themselves interrupting, again, not being aware of their own needs and social graces at the time, and just cutting people off in order to get inserted into a conversation. All of those behaviors can be extremely annoying and irritating in the classroom and at home. And I'm not saying anything that anyone here tonight or watching this video that is a parent of a child or person with ADHD, they already understand that. There's also a condition that for ADHD individuals where both of those are combined. So the person has difficulty with attention, concentration, and impulse and hyperactivity. So it can look like lots of different things. We touched on this just a little bit, but again, I want to emphasize that these outcomes are not they are not due to ADHD. They are the result of the struggles that come with ADHD. So if I can't organize my brain and make the outcome, the output, if I can't do that easily, I can't get things done easily, then I maybe that I end up feeling like a loser. I feel like a failure. That is a buster for self-esteem, right? It's really hard to be confident if I find myself always being told I didn't do it right or I got it wrong, or knowing in my own head I didn't do it right and I got it wrong. It can affect social relationships. If I interrupt a lot, if I don't understand waiting to talk and I can't regulate my need to speak, then I may appear to be insensitive or selfish or just rude, even though that is not in any way, shape, or form my intent. Getting things done, chores, homework, being responsible in the way that parents want their children to be responsible, is very difficult. Being able to follow directions, and we're going to talk a little bit more about why that's difficult. But when 9 times out of 10, when we give directions to somebody, we give a list of directions. That's very hard. Again, those distractions in the brain. I might remember one of them. I'm not going to remember 6 of them. I might begin to feel sad and unmotivated, and again, going back to that low self-esteem, and sometimes that can lead to very ineffective coping. And as we move into the more teenage years, substance use is commonly found with teens who are experiencing ADHD symptoms.
Right. So, with all of those pieces in mind, with understanding some of the challenges, just wanted to kind of take a moment to think about some of these questions. So, as a person who maybe was a child with ADHD, or very likely if you are here joining, if you are raising a child with ADHD, what have some of your biggest successes and biggest frustrations been? And you can feel free to share this in the chat if you're joining right now, because we want to validate that there are absolutely frustrations that you are going to encounter, but to also really acknowledge the successes that you have had. We want to recognize your own efforts and how much you are doing as a parent. So we will be sharing a lot of information and content about different strategies you can try, tips and tricks, things that we know tend to be very helpful for ADHD kids. But we want you to have a space too to think about maybe what have you already tried and implemented? What have you seen be a success for your kid? And to reflect as well on how have you coped with some of the challenges and frustrations? How have you taken care of yourself? How do you encourage and support yourself in this process? Because I know, as we mentioned, that is where we will be ending, to really bring home that piece of what you are doing well as a parent. So before we even really begin to start talking about techniques and strategies, wanted to just take a moment to reflect on who you are as a parent, what your own style is, how you engage with your kids. So parenting involves providing these different conditions for the child. So as a parent, you are providing that safety, that care, that stability and warmth of boundaries, guidance, education, stimulation. All kids need these, but because of the different frustrations and challenges that Claire has spoken to with ADHD children, those ADHD symptoms can create lots of room for some of those challenging negative interactions. And some of those negative interactions can complicate some of these different parenting tasks and conditions. So we are going to start just by speaking to those parenting styles first, and then we will move into some other pieces from there. I know we went through some of these pieces with our overview. So we will start just with parenting styles and techniques. So in terms of the parenting strategy or the parenting style that we know is most effective for all children, that is the authoritative parenting style. So this is a style where parents, they are nurturing, they are responsive, they are supportive, but they also are consistent with limits. They're consistent with boundaries. They really focus on balancing both warmth with the structure, boundaries, and all of those pieces. So that is the overall umbrella of some of these different parenting pieces we're going to be talking about is within this authoritative style. So to break down this authoritative parenting style, which we know, once again, is most effective for all kids, but can be even critical for navigating some of the pieces with ADHD. So as we've spoken to, this is a parenting style that is very warm, very positive, but can balance those that firm limit and boundary setting. So there's a lot of pieces here as well with modeling. So you are going to be doing a lot as the parent to show and not just tell. So you are going to be modeling how you regulate or handle your emotions, how you use respectful language, how you show appreciation and gratitude for yourself, for your child, for others in the family. Um, there's going to be a lot of pieces as well about using clear communication, using standards and expectations that are appropriate for the age and development of your child, and that you are expecting success and highlighting your kids' accomplishments while also understanding and giving room for mistakes, for failures, and for all the things that come with that. And then we're ending there with the consistency piece. And that's something we'll be circling back to with a lot of our different strategies for routines, for discipline. The consistency is so critical. And it's so more easily said than done. And I'm sure a lot of these pieces you've maybe tried before or given a shot, but we know the consistency with maintaining that is often where challenges can come up. So we'll move to some other pieces, but just want to give you some space, Claire, if you had any other thoughts to share for parenting styles.
Thanks, Lainey. I promise I will only take a second. I just want to really highlight your comment, Lainey, about the modeling, that for children, especially for all children, we all learn best by looking and observing and seeing something. So when I'm working with clinicians in training, if they can see a technique, they're more likely to grasp it and understand it and apply it. That's true for all of us. So modeling is so critical to the learning process, but really critical to ADHD youth and adults as well, but mostly because it's using visual. You get to see something which really allows for the brain to process information differently than just figuring it out on your own or reading it, or you're actually seeing it in action. So I just want to say, you as a parent, taking the time to appreciate how you do these things and maybe exaggerate them a little bit with a child who has ADHD so that they can see you doing what you do well. Thanks, Lainey.
Mm-hmm. And I know I mentioned that consistency is going to be a key piece of some of the other strategies that we talk about, but what Claire shared as well about things being visual, letting them see and observe, that is going to be a big piece of a lot of our strategies as well. It's how can things be as visual and as seen and as just visible as possible. We'll definitely be coming back to those. So to start with that on how you can best give different instructions or directions to kids with ADHD. Because one of the symptoms that is on our diagnostic manual for ADHD is the seeming to not listen or having a difficult time following instructions, or especially having a hard time following multi-step directions or making it through long tasks. We know that this is an area where the ADHD brain can take many detours. So how you can best modify how you engage or share information can be very helpful for helping them stay successful. So one of the main pieces is honestly minimizing how many words you use, staying direct, staying clear, staying crisp. To share critical information will be very important because we know that short-term memory and the ability to store that information in long-term memory is impacted by ADHD and executive functioning. So if you can keep it short, crisp, to the point when you're sharing information that is most critical, that will be very helpful. Also asking, I'm jumping around a little bit here on our list, but also asking for information to be shared back, asking them to repeat back what you said to them can be really helpful for making sure that they got the most important pieces of what you just asked them to do or what you just shared. So just saying to them directly, can you repeat back to me what I just told you? Or can you repeat back what you need to do? Can be really helpful for just making sure you're staying on track with each other of what needs to be done. Also, the using statements rather than questions. Please pick up your shoes versus what did I ask you? And also giving less room for some of the negotiables. So if you're saying go do something, make sure it's framed as a request or a statement, or I'm sorry, making sure it's shared as a demand rather than a request that they could say no to. And when you ask it as a question, when you ask it as a request, no is a valid option. So that's one thing to think about as well when you're sharing different instructions or things that they need to do. Also with the giving instructions one step at a time, we're thinking about no more than 3 steps. So we know children with ADHD have difficulty with time and sequence of events. So trying to narrow down the sequence of steps that need to happen to complete a larger goal can be very challenging. So when you're able to give those instructions one step at a time, it helps them stay productive and work towards that larger goal without having quite as many detours.
Can I
And with
just
the memory,
Can I
go
just
right
add
ahead.
into that, Lainey? A good example of that is go upstairs, brush your teeth, do your hair, make your bed, and then come down with your book bag. That's way too much for many brains, but that's way too much for an ADHD brain. So having a list, as Lainey's saying, the visuals, having a list or taking it one step at a time, asking them to show you, go upstairs, brush your teeth, let me see your teeth. Okay, now go get your book bag. So breaking it down and expecting one step at a time, I think is really, and I think it helps to have the examples. When you think about it, we don't always realize we're giving 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 step directions sometimes. Thanks.
Absolutely. And then to give space, I know there's some pieces there about just giving some space for following up with further explanations when age appropriate and needed, to give them space just to make sure they process and understand your request or your demand or your instruction, and to keep it as less wordy as possible, and to follow up with kind of further feedback, repeating back, help, and support as needed. And to reward the successes. So we know children are motivated so strongly by positive attention, are motivated by praise. When you are really strongly rewarding or praising a behavior that you want to see continue, that is going to be a great first step to continuing seeing improvements with this piece of effectively responding to instructions or directions. So the rewarding, not just necessarily punishing or changing behaviors that are more negative or undesired, but really thinking about how you want to highlight and praise and reward the behaviors that you want to continue seeing, such as them picking up their shoes the first time you ask. So we will keep rolling a little bit on some more of those kind of discipline and instruction pieces, as well as some other things with medication, health, lifestyle, other pieces there. So with ADHD being a neurodevelopmental disorder, one of the main treatments is medication to help address some of those neurological pieces. So medication is something that can be very effective for helping the ADHD brain and all of its executive functions work more effectively. So for For medication, this can look like stimulant medication or non-stimulant medication. Stimulants typically work by increasing some of that blood flow to the brain that's responsible for those executive functions. So helping with those functions of the brain, like paying attention to a task, helping the ability to self-regulate, helping inhibit certain behaviors, helping maintain effort, all of those pieces. So those can be very, very helpful with the use of medication. Most of this, you are going to go work with your primary physician or pediatrician. So exploring some of the side effects, some of the pros and cons should always be something that you explore with your medical provider. And we try to talk about some of the pieces with medication as well, as it is one tool in a large toolbox, because we know lots of factors can impact medication use. Some medications don't work for that child, or the side effects are too significant, or they wear off. So there's lots of other kind of pieces that we talk about then for like counseling or other behavioral interventions besides just medication, because we know lots of things can impact medication use or effectiveness, even though medication as a whole is a very effective tool for managing ADHD symptoms. Any piece you'd like to speak to for medication right now, Claire?
No, I think that kind of sums it up.
Alrighty. So then to think about things as well for healthy lifestyle. And we are once again thinking about how these different pieces are so important for everyone. So they are critical for all children, but we know that for the ADHD child in particular, some of these different pieces with sleep, eating, daily routines can be very impacted by ADHD symptoms, which is why we're reinforcing them even more. But we know that maintaining good health, maintaining good sleep, good eating, good exercise, good connection and enjoyment with others, use of coping strategies, emotion regulation strategies, those are things that are going to be helpful for everybody for executive functioning purposes, and therefore, once again, even more critical for ADHD children. So keeping regular and consistent sleep routines, managing healthy eating routines, engaging in daily exercise, using strategies to cope with stress, manage impulses, learn some of those control, can all be very, very useful strategies for, once again, thinking about how you can keep that child best on track and away from some of the detours as they arise. So I'm keeping an eye on time, and I know we're right at about 38 minutes, so we will be wrapping up within the next 20. So we have got some different behavior management and discipline strategies that we'll talk about here, and some other pieces with also applying these strategies with older adolescents and teens before we wrap up with our parent self-care and next other resources. So there is a lot of information on this slide, and once again, a lot of things that are very doable, but can be harder to maintain over time. So to start with some of the pieces about rules and expectations, I know we started with some of the other communication pieces about how can you be as clear and crisp as possible, and also how can you make them visible. So important information, things like family rules, things like bedtimes, to-do lists. How can you externalize that as much as possible? So keeping these things visual. I think on quite a few of these different ones, how you can make this visible and visual will be a very critical piece. So things like timers, clocks, things that show time, externalize time, make the time passing will be very important. Reviewing rules and expectations with your child, having them repeat them back, same piece, very important to make sure that you're staying on the same page about what the expectations are. As we talked a little bit before as well, how you can really focus on successes, reward successes, especially to help with some of the pieces with creating a healthy self-esteem, healthy image of themselves, because we know that self-esteem can be really impacted by ADHD struggles. with not being able to do what you feel like you need to do, with getting negative feedback at home, at school, or maybe from other peers, really highlighting successes, helping boost any of those opportunities, whether they're planned or just more spontaneous, can be really important. So once again, with some of the discipline pieces, reviewing expectations and rules and making them as visible as possible. We'll come back to that piece, repeating back. Um, Redirecting behavior when possible. So avoiding power struggles, knowing what behaviors are your biggest priority. So what can maybe be ignored. So we know that kids with ADHD are going to struggle with performance in some degree, that they might not be able to handle the same amount of tasks within the same amount of time as other neurotypical children. So when we've got the priorities that we're focusing efforts on completing the most important tasks, or that the tasks that are most crucial for healthy development, like school performance, peer relationships, hygiene, those definitely need top priority. Some other pieces, like making the bed every single day, or some other kind of behaviors that might not need as much of an extra focus, as it doesn't play as much of a larger role with some of the healthy development, can some of those pieces, or some of the other behaviors that we think of as more annoying, can those simply be ignored instead of also getting negative feedback or criticism? And then also with the redirecting behavior, can be helpful to think of talk less, touch more. Like, how can you really connect with your kid through physical contact, through hugs and affection? Or how can you get their attention maybe from like simply putting your hand on their shoulder instead of saying or shouting their name? How can you kind of best connect through some of those pieces as well? Um, and then we'll come back to some of also the pieces for using rewards and positive reinforcement. So positive reinforcement are any things that help increase a behavior that you want to see more of. So a lot of this comes down to understanding what your child's incentive or motivation is, knowing that you can help boost some of that motivation through some of these incentives or rewards for good behavior. So providing immediate positive feedback for good behavior can be a really helpful place to start, and having a variety of ways that you provide praise or provide that feedback, so it doesn't feel like it becomes too stilted or too repetitive, and be as specific as possible in the behavior that you're praising so that they know exactly what they did and how to repeat it. There can be a big difference between "you were really well behaved tonight" and "I really liked how you completed your homework the first time I asked with no complaints." So really highlighting and praising the specific behavior and having that specificity there, and changing up the rewards between like some of that praise or that social piece with some more like tangible physical rewards, or with some other kind of like symbolic rewards, like earning tokens that they can build up and use to earn bigger rewards. Um, that can also be something that you try, but trying to switch up some of those pieces as well, periodically, because we also know that the ADHD brain gets bored easily. So some of those things may not be as rewarding over time. So being able to change and switch up some of those pieces will be really helpful too. Um, then also, we really can't underestimate how important time as a family, rewarding and enjoyable time together, and one-on-one time with a parent. Some of those pieces are also incredibly rewarding and enjoyable for a child, and you can really utilize that to reinforce some of the behaviors that you want to see, but also just to maintain a positive relationship with your child, because we know, as we mentioned a bit before, some of these challenges and struggles can lead to a lot of different negative interactions that can wear on them, that can wear on you. So the space that you give for spending time together one-on-one, or to spend time together as a family, can be very, very critical to success. So I know I am running through these pieces a little bit more quickly, just for the kind of sake of time. Is there anything that I may have missed or that you want to make sure we hit before we move on, Claire?
The only thing I would highlight is what you mentioned before around the modeling, and that some of these things that you're using for discipline or rewards, it's really important for your kids to see you do that for yourself as well. So if you've done got done mowing the lawn and it was hot and you come in, you get yourself a nice glass of iced tea or lemonade, maybe add to your words, I did a great job on the lawn. I feel really good about myself. I'm going to enjoy this glass of iced tea. So you're modeling for them how to provide their own reward for getting things done in a way that feels good. So I just bring it back to the more they see you doing these things, rewarding yourself, being positive about yourself, putting limits on yourself, the more they will be able to accept when you also do the same with them.
Right, so we're going to speak, these are some different behavior management pieces in the home. We're just going to speak very briefly about some of the pieces in the school setting. So we know that ADHD children can have a variety of different challenges in the school environment. Claire and I once did a training on ADHD where we had a participant share that the way that he felt as a child with ADHD in the school setting was like being a woodpecker in a concrete parking garage. You are doing what you know how to do, how your brain works, what you feel like you are meant to do, and it is not working. You are not being successful in that setting. So the school environment and the way that it is structured and set up often is not an environment that is inherently going to be successful for the ADHD child. So how you can advocate for your child and working with the school to help modify that environment or help make changes to help them be successful, to do what they know how to do, how they know how to use their brain in that environment, will be really critical. And in some ways, you can think about that in the home as well, of how can you modify the environment to help your child have the best chance to be successful. So in the school environment, that is going to look like frequent communication, advocacy for your child. Um, in terms of actual school plans that can help make accommodations or best support the child, that might look like something like 504 plans or IEPs. So an IEP is an individualized education plan, which is a blueprint that essentially details how is that student's education plan that helps address their own needs. How is that plan going to be carried out? So 504 plans are fairly similar. They're just less formal and apply to some more situations. Most children with an ADHD diagnosis are going to qualify for an IEP, so that there are different kind of plans or accommodations that can be put in place in the school setting that's going to help them best be successful there. So your participation and involvement with the school is very critical in terms of the work that you do at home with like helping them with homework, studying projects, all of those pieces. Consistency and routine is once again going to be an asset. So having consistent times where they complete their work after school will be really critical, while also knowing that they are going to need time for breaks and that you're likely going to need, in some ways, especially as they're young, to stay close to help when there are detours, help them solve problems as they arise, and to help build that motivation and attention on one task. And when possible, to end with something that is rewarding and fun to signify that there is kind of some positive that comes at the end of that hard work. So, anything else you want to make sure we hit on the school front?
Well, I think that covers it.
Alrighty. So we'll spend some time just speaking again to the challenges that often come up and also talk a bit about adopting this for teens before we finish. So we know that these three areas can be big ways that challenges come up with helping ADHD children. So transitions, moving from task to task, especially moving from an enjoyable favored task to a less enjoyable, less preferred task, those transition pieces can be times where a lot of negative emotion or pushback or other things can come up. We also know that public spaces where a child has to really monitor their own behavior, control what they're doing, follow those expectations for what is supposed to occur in public social spaces can be very challenging. Emotion regulation is also highly impacted by ADHD symptoms, as there are so many different pieces to handling our own emotions that are impacted by executive functioning. So those are all pieces where we know challenges can come up. So some pieces, strategies very quickly for each of those. Big part with transitions is, once again, routines and consistency. So the more a child is able to predict what is coming next, that they know what comes first, what comes next, all of those pieces can really help. Being able to plan ahead of time for what a transition is going to look like or what a change in routine is going to look like, and being able to use different coping strategies or different routines for being able to cope with those changes or moving from one activity to another. Also with public spaces, being able to explore expectations, helping prepare, helping them know what to expect will be really critical. Giving feedback as soon as you see them doing the behavior you want to see happen in that setting. Breathing and mindfulness and other coping strategies for when challenges occur or when emotions get high. And that leads right into some of the big emotions pieces as well, of how can you work to help them label, name, and understand their feelings. Things like feelings thermometers, rating scales for emotion. So being able to say, am I at a 10 right now for anger? So I'm at a 10 out of 10 versus I'm at a 2 or I'm at a 5. Being able to put names and labels to emotions to understand and talk about them. Being able to explore different ways you can express that emotion. So being able to share, okay, I can see and understand your anger. I can validate that, but what's a different way that you can show that you're angry? And coming back to our modeling as well, how do you show how you cope with emotions? How do you label your emotions and talk about them and cope when things get difficult? That they will pick up in a heartbeat as well. So some of these pieces we've talked about a little bit already, but it just really reinforces how can you make things as visual as possible? Do you use as many visual cues, prompts, and reminders to help with those functioning? So I know we've talked about these cues as guiding lights to combat distractions and stay back on track when there are detours. So things like having a visual daily schedule, having as many analog and not digital clocks to be able to kind of see the passing of time, having as many organizational strategies, keeping consistency once again with the timing of routines. So routines with bedtimes, meal times, chores, play activities, keeping visual reminders, and trying to minimize external distractions during the times that are most critical as well. So TV, music off during times that are most challenging, such as maybe transition times, getting ready for school, needing to focus on homework, all of those pieces. Oh,
So the final behavioral thing we want to kind of focus on is that all of the things Lainey's been talking about are strategies for all children and actually all adults. They work with even not ADHD people. They are for optimal functioning, but they are critical for the ADHD brain. So when it comes to teens, we want to continue doing all of the things that Lainey has highlighted. We just want to do it in a way that is more developmentally appropriate and respectful of their stage of development. So teens are moving into a more independent phase, and they like to feel competent. They like to see themselves as the expert on everything and highly capable. And so it is particularly hard for teens with ADHD who may be experiencing challenges. So what you want to be able to do is, again, using all the things Lainey's already addressed, but in a higher functioning way. So if you have a child who is having difficulty with their studies and getting their homework done, you want to address that directly. You want to be able to say, I have concerns. I know you think you can do this on your own. We talked about it, but I am having concerns after reviewing the progress report I saw online. You've missed 3 assignments. So very clear, very direct. And then providing some structure and support for how we're going to address that. Establish and enforce rules. Children don't outgrow rules because they're teens. The way they're enforced, the way you talk about them, that may be a little bit more respectful of their age and development, but it's still there. So rules are not something that disappear for any of us. Actually, we follow rules because they help us stay safe. When problems do occur, involving your youth in the solutions. So I'm interested in hearing how you think you would get your homework done better. Clearly, it's not working what we agreed on before. Let's come up with a new plan. So collaborative problem solving. And then again, modeling responsible behavior. So when you get home from work and you're tired and yet you still have the dishes to do and you want to get the laundry done, being able to say, these responsibilities are so hard, I am so exhausted, I'm going to do 15 minutes and then I'm going to take a break and work a puzzle and then I'm going to go back and finish it. So that, again, they see you using the same strategies for success. And lastly, as we begin to wrap up our presentation here today, we want to talk about you. We want to talk about parents and how critical it is that if you're going to do this, the things we're talking about, it is beyond what might have worked for, let's say you have 3 children, 2 of them are not ADHD. Things seemed easy. And now you feel like a failure because it's not working with number 3. Please know that you're not alone in that feeling and that your own self-care is critical. And the first part of self-care is giving yourself permission to not be perfect, to appreciate the fact that you are amazing. The things you do, providing basic care, safety, warmth, stimulation, guidance, boundaries, and stability for your family, for yourself, for your children. Those are amazing things. And no, no one's perfect. Everybody gets tired and worn out. And so giving yourself permission to be human and to make less than perfect actions, and being open with your child when you do about those things. The best outcomes for children with ADHD, as we've gone over tonight, is behavior therapy, medication, and positive parenting. And those provide almost a sure thing formula if we can implement those for ourselves and our family every day in the home and advocate for them at school. The best outcome for parents is that you are not alone, that you find social supports in the form of support groups, perhaps, or even online groups where you can vent, where you can get other tips, where you can get the support you need, that you also pay attention to your own lifestyle. I hear a lot of parents say, I put my kids' needs first. Yeah, you want to keep your kids' needs high in your priority list, but your needs have to come first. Otherwise, you won't be able to be there for your child. So, getting enough rest, eating the right foods, getting some exercise are all critical to your success and your feelings of success as you see yourself giving and giving and giving and being effective. That is really, really dependent and facilitated by your own self-care. So everything, all the tips and tricks today, if you aren't taking care of yourself, you're not going to be able to implement any of those very well, and they won't be as effective. So we want to take a minute and just one, remind you you're amazing, and two, encourage you to find ways to create a self-care plan for yourself and stick to it consistently. One of the ways that I personally have found enormously helpful is this website right here. It's called Attitude, and it has been around a long time. It publishes a magazine. It provides so many resources for parents, for adults with ADHD, for teens with ADHD, just a wide range of options, um, articles, more tips, and just some way to begin to feel connected to a community of people all struggling with the same thing. So I would really encourage you to check out the website. There you can sign on and become part of it with a slight fee, or you can just use the resources there. There's numerous resources at no cost. So I would encourage you to think about using the Attitude website to kind of provide your own self-care in that regard.
And then to wrap up here today, here are a few other resources that contributed to us creating this workshop today. And then we also wanted to share some further pieces on our parent education series that's being funded by the Columbus Foundation. So we have a lot of parent education resources through this right now. So we've got this virtual parent workshop. This is one of 4 that we are providing. There's also some parent pep talks. Which are like small, like 15-minute podcasts kind of setups that talk about some different parenting tips and strategies. There's a number of different resource sheets there, like different tips or other supports. There's some different on-demand courses that you can do on your computer, on your phone, that are 15, 20 minutes in duration about a range of different topics. So you can go to our website or use the QR code to access those. These are all free, all very easily accessible resources for you there.
And again, thanks to the Columbus Foundation, because we have been able to provide all those resources to the community free because of their willingness to fund this. So we are really grateful to them to support the work that we do.
Alrighty, so just wanted to give some final thanks for you all for being a part of this. And here is some of information for our contacts. If you need further help, resources, or are interested in mental health services, that's how you can reach us. And
Thank
that
you for your time.
that concludes our workshop today.
Yeah,
Thank you for
we're
being a part
glad
of
you
it.
were here. Thank you.
Yeah, hope you all have a wonderful day.